Hey guys, everybody's going to be muted upon entry, so please unmute yourself.
Will do.
Hey, Zach. Hey, Ed. So you're going to record, correct, Zach?
Yeah, so it's actually already recording. It was part of the settings that I chose. So
Do you guys have a sense of how many people have accepted?
I'm not sure at this time.
Okay.
I'm not sure who the iPhone is. It looks like they're still trying to connect audio here. But
That's probably Dino.
okay. So Eddie has not joined yet on our side. I know it says Edward on the screen, but that's me. Sorry, is Brad on your team?
No.
Okay, I'm gonna put them back in the waiting room.
Hi, for all of you that are joining the call, we're just going to pause just for a couple of minutes to allow some stragglers to join us, and then we'll start maybe at about 3 minutes or so. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I won't touch it. Yeah.
Let me just remind everybody to please mute their phone so we don't have any background noise during the presentation. Thank you. Give it another minute or two. Okay, why don't we get started? Welcome to everybody for joining the call this evening. My name is Eddie Gibstein. I'm the manager of Big Sky Opportunity Fund, and we have with us today the management team for Progro Bio. Allow me to introduce the CEO, Blake Young, the Chief Operating Officer, Barry Roberts, and Dr. Robert Blake, the Chief Science Officer.
Hey, Eddie, we're getting a lot of feedback. I'm not sure if some people are unmuted or what.
Looks like everybody is. It looks like people are muted. Is that better? Nope. So again, I'll mute myself. So at this time, allow me to turn the call over to Blake Young.
Okay, good afternoon or good evening, I guess, everyone. Thanks, Eddie. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today to learn either, I don't know if you were on our first call. If you heard our first call, we had some good questions, and we hope to refine our conversation on this discussion this afternoon. I'm going to cover some introduction on the company, and then Dr. Bruck will talk about the science behind our discoveries, and then I'll finish up with some perspective on our go-to-market strategy for Progro. We're a Georgia-based biotech company, and we're specifically focused on the microbial sciences sector. And the underpinnings of our company rests on a body of lifetime work that was performed by Dr. Bruck that you'll hear much more about from him shortly. We have a very smart team with significant firepower, a team that's highly adaptable, very creative, low egos, and we have strong insights on how to create. So we're very excited about the opportunities in front of us, and hopefully you'll get the same sense when we're finished here in just a bit. In short, our company has developed all natural plant growth and pathogen controlling solutions that are comprised of living organisms, and that solution is non-toxic, it's 100% biodegradable, and it's non-carcinogenic. And when you apply Progro's solutions to the soil, they produce really remarkable results, which we'll share with you in a bit, with respect to acceleration of plant growth, controlling and mitigating soil-borne pathogens, as well as parasitic nematodes. And we'll explain what those are in a second as well. So to be very clear at the onset, our primary focus as a company is not research and development. We're not looking to make discoveries. Our cornerstone product, which we'll speak about in just a minute, named Rhizol, has already been extensively tested and trialed, and you'll also see impressive results of the product on a couple of slides that the doc will go through. We've piloted and tested Rhizol across a number of subject target crops and plants, and I have a slide that'll explain that. And we're now seeking to fund the acceleration of the production of the product and accelerate our sales and marketing of our solutions and our products. So we're very pleased with the raise thus far. If you've had an opportunity to review our private placement memorandum, we're right at the halfway mark of our targeted $7 million raise, and we're quite excited about the traction that we're getting in our discussions. The timing, in our view, for capitalizing this sort of business is perfect, given the substantial focus on natural and green and environmentally safe products. So we're really excited to have you consider supporting the vision of Progro and to tell you more about what we're up to. Next slide there, Barry. You know, I've been asked by friends who know I've become associated with Progro over the last year or so, Blake, what is a microbe? And what I typically point out is that we're really talking about the basics of life itself. Bacteria and fungi and things like viruses are all groups of microbes, and they're microscopic single-celled organisms that have dominated evolving ecosystems forever. They eventually evolve, they colonize, and they're found in all soils around the world. And they're most ubiquitous and prolific in very nutrient-rich soil systems where you could easily find 2 billion microbes in a single gram of soil. So another key aspect of microbes is that they inherently have very simple genetics, or DNA, and that DNA of a microbe facilitates continuous mutation and evolution, which is a fundamental aspect of how the product works when it's applied to nutrient-deprived soils. So microbes are fundamentally very important factors with respect to the diversity of soil, and thus they're an indicator of soil quality and soil sustainability. I grew up on a large farm in South Louisiana. My grandfather planted rice and soybeans on hundreds of acres, and I can remember as a young boy him trying to teach me why crop rotation was so important to improve and maintain soil health, optimize nutrients in the soil, and combat pests and weed pressure. And speaking to the fact that different crops have different nutritional needs and they're susceptible to different pathogens and different pests. Of course, those lessons from my grandfather were over 50 years ago. And as the first bullet here on this slide emphasizes, and particularly since the 1950s, we've seen a literal explosion of toxic man-made fertilizers and pesticides that come on the scene, all trying to help microbes do more of what they do, but at the same time resulting in more and more sterilization. I think someone has unmuted because we're getting feedback again. Let's try that.
Blake, are you in the same room as anybody?
No, we're all we're separate. No one is on. I'm not sure what's going on. And so the significant focus, the point is the significant focus on the environment and returning biodiversity to our ecosystems in soil bodes very well for what Progro is attempting to do and for the markets that we're aiming to capture and to innovate in. It's also really important to point out that our solutions are not fertilizers, and that's sometimes misunderstood. Fertilizers are chemically manufactured and they contain what's called NPKs, an acronym for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, all of which are considered macronutrients for plants. And the vast majority of farmers, roughly 90% or so, use NPK on their farms. And we also know that excessive use of fertilizers can effectively render soils sterile. And in effect, that's a big problem for farmers all over the world. Another thing is Rhizol is not augmented with NPKs because it doesn't need to be. And we'll explain why that's the case in just a minute. what else could I say here about this slide? One other important point, we're also not a GMO company. We're not genetically engineering anything. I mentioned this because there are some entities in the space claiming to be genetically engineering microbes. And that's a second very important distinction about our company. Everything we're doing at Progro is 100% organic. We're not trying to play the role of God here, but rather leverage what has already been created in nature. So this is a disruptive space that we intend to be very strong in, and we know that we have a strong head start compared to other players, and we'll explain why we believe that so strongly. Next slide, Barry, please. So how do you get from a microbe into a product formulation? And this slide is a representation of that, albeit it's overly simplified. It's nonetheless pretty accurate in its depiction. As I discussed a minute ago, microbes are found in soil, and another very important ingredient in our product is something called mycorrhizae. Someone sent a question in the last meeting about how we compare to products like an NCS Green Earth. That product, for example, is limited to a single type of mycorrhizae, and you'll hear more about that as we proceed. Progro Bio is much more than just a single type of organism. The formulation of Rhizol is comprised of certain fungi, bacteria, and mycorrhizae. And just to explain a bit, and Dr. Brook can do a much better job than me, the word mycorrhizae means fungal root. And so to be specific, fungi have a symbiotic relationship with the roots of many plants. And when that mycorrhizae is present in the soil and allowed to grow and expand, it permits the plant to obtain additional moisture and nutrients. Remember, I said the DNA of a microbe is very simple, which allows it to multiply quickly. So what Dr. Brooks' research has done, as this slide tries to show, is extracted very unique separations from all of these microbes in the library, and those are referred to as isolates. And these proprietary microbial isolates, along with numerous types of mycorrhizae, make up the Progro library, which is part of the important intellectual property of the company. These living organisms are then plated in a sterile lab environment, and they're grown, and they've been tested repeatedly in various combinations. And over the years, what has been formulated has been proven to be a very high product, a product with very high efficacy rate, which is what the doctor is going to review in just a minute. From there, these microbes are combined and they're essentially brewed into what we call a mother tincture in our laboratory. There's a picture of our lab today there. And that process involves adding certain organic nutrients to the mix, like organic yeast extract, vitamin B, organic molasses, and so on. And this is brewed to the desired concentration. And from there, that liquid is either bottled or processed through what's called a lyophilizer machine, which essentially freeze dries the liquid into a powder form, which can then be reconstituted back into a liquid. In fact, Barry Roberts, our Chief Operating Officer, will be traveling down to Texas at the end of this week to hand deliver some of this product powder for a very, very large cotton grower where we're working with them this summer on a cotton grow. And just to put it in perspective, 50 acres of treatment would be about 100 grams of our product. 1 gram is equivalent to 1/4 of a teaspoon. So to treat 50 acres of crop would require about 12 teaspoons of Rhizol. So it gives you in a powder form. So it gives you some perspective of the potency of the formulation that's been created within the company. Next slide, Barry, please. The key to a strong microbial library really is the diversity of how the various soils were sourced and the level of microbial activity in the soil. And at the most basic level, this really is the secret sauce behind Progro's intellectual property. So this slide just shows a small sampling of where the soils that we work with have been sourced that underpin the library. And the key here is diversity. Different geographies have different types of soil, and to the extent that a company's research in this area is as diverse and wide as possible, the broader a spectrum of discoveries that you're able to make, as has been the case with Dr. Bruck's research across arenas like hormones and enzymes and metabolites and so on. And that extreme diversity has made its way into the Rhizol product discovery. Now, over the decades of his work, Dr. Bruck has literally isolated thousands of microbial isolates, and the ones that are chosen for product inclusion are specifically chosen because of their very high biological activity. And that's a very important point because that can be very different across microbes, and that's an important factor in the efficacy of the product itself. Next slide, Barry. So when we speak of Rhizol, it's comprised of numerous unique microbial isolates, and they're all selected, as I said, because of their biological activity. And they basically do three things to the soil, when you apply them to soil. They colonize the cells of the plant feeder roots and the rhizosphere, basically the dirt in the surrounding area of the roots, and they accelerate plant growth and they increase yield ultimately. And Dr. Bruck will speak to the impressive metrics in terms of root growth compared to the non-treated crops and plants. And secondly, as I said earlier, these microorganisms break down organic matter and they result in increasing the soil fertility. So remember, I said we're not a fertilizer company, but we believe very firmly that the amount of fertilizer that will ultimately need to be used in conjunction with our product will be less than what is currently used. And that resonates quite well today with growers, given the fact that, you know, we have a macroeconomic issue relative to the production of fertilizers, which primarily come from the Russia and Ukrainian regions of the world. And then the third thing that Rhizol does is increases water retention capability and perpetuates drought resistance with a plant. So our market research has determined that there's no other product on the market, organic or otherwise, that contains the broad spectrum of natural soil microbes that Rhizol does, and that it's proven to mitigate and ameliorate a huge number of agricultural problems, which the doctor will talk about in just a minute. And then my last slide, Barry. So before I turn the discussion over to Dr. Bruck, I want to spend just a few minutes highlighting the development path of Rhizol that we have been through. So this is a timeline of sorts, and it speaks in summary to the level of activity and subject focus of testing through the years that has been performed leading up to most recently last year. As I mentioned earlier in the slide that spoke to how microbes become products, perhaps the best way to describe Dr. Bruck's efforts involve collecting soils from around the world, as we showed, extracting microbial isolates, combining and testing these microbes together, and then exhaustive trials and tests with scientifically documented results. So the concept of the Rhizol product has evolved over a period of decades through these efforts. And you can see examples on the left side of the slide, which are by far not exhaustive, of all of the targets that have been tested across agricultural, horticultural, and silvicultural trees segments. And the doctor is going to summarize those and drill into some of the detail. Now, interestingly, last year, we began looking very intensely at a new challenge set that's related to something referred to as the Chinese guava nematode. And it's a particularly nasty root knot. It was first identified in China in 1983 and in 2001 in the US. And the issue with this root nematode is that it reproduces at a very, very high rate, and it can go from very low levels to severe infestations in a very short period of time. So there are numerous examples of outright crop failure due to this issue, and particularly in crops like sweet potato, which is highly dependent on quality as well as yield for success. and many other crops are susceptible to the same problem: soybean, cotton, vegetables, peppers, eggplants, the list goes on and on. So we began researching this problem in earnest, and Dr. Bruck isolated 5 additional microbes last year that had very high efficacy rates against this nematodal problem. And the decision was made to further augment Ryzol's formulation with these microbes, and the testing results have been pretty amazing, as you'll see. This year, the company has a number of what we're referring to as commercial positioning grows, and those are on the right-hand side of the chart. Hundreds of acres of plantings with the types of targets that you see there, with numerous growers. And as I mentioned, Barry is heading down south to work on Friday with a cotton grower who plants some 20,000 acres of cotton in West Texas. And they're excited about what we have presented, and we've got their full attention.
Like, may I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
So I just want to also add that we're obviously I'm here in New York on Long Island, and one of the on the right hand side there is golf turf.
Mhm.
I've been in the golf world for 50 years, literally, and have been involved as a green chairman and on the boards of several clubs that I belong to. Ryzol has recently talked to and is now going to begin a trial, well, Progro Bio, of course, with two golf clubs. One is called Glen Oaks on Long Island, and the other is Sabonic. I mentioned these clubs because Sabonic, these are 2 very prestigious clubs. Sabonic hosted a women's USGA Open Championship a couple of years ago. Glen Oaks recently held a PGA Tour event, the Northern Trust, as well as a LPGA Tour event. And the superintendent, his name is Craig Currier at Glen Oaks, is probably one of the most respected golf course superintendents in the country. He was basically given tremendous amount of credit for getting Bethpage Black, also a very prestigious public golf course, into good enough condition to host 2 U.S. Opens. Having those kinds of tests certainly is a tremendous feather in our cap, in the cap of Progro Bio. I don't, when we talk about obviously produce and crops, etc., I don't know the exact number, but there are tens of thousands of golf courses in the United States, many of which are like we are here in the Northeast, certainly subjected to various different turf diseases. Dr. Bruck could get into if he wants, and I can tell you that 5-6 years ago, a tremendous amount of the golf courses in the Northeast basically lost up to 40% of their turf as a result of basal leaf anthracnose and some other types of, I guess they're funguses or bacteria. And I specifically asked Dr. Bruck about that, and he can get into it. But I just wanted to mention that, the verticals are unlimited for this company. And golf is obviously just one. Last time on the call, we had growers in Saudi Arabia, who are growing in the desert. The bottom line is that the amount of land that is available to feed the earth, to feed the growing population is shrinking. And it's shrinking not just because less and less of it's being used, but less and less of it can be used because of soil-borne pathogens and things like nematodes. I just want to ask one thing, if Dr. Bruck or Blake, can you just tell people what a nematode actually is? I mean, am I correct? It's a type of worm, kind of.
I'll chime in there.
Thanks. I'll quiet down now.
All you need to do, everybody knows what an earthworm is. So picture an earthworm in your mind and shrink it down 1,000 times into a little microscopic annelid worm. What we have are 2 different kinds of nematodes: the free living ones, which actually are like earthworms because they eat organic matter and they poop into the soil by the billions, and that's good. And Ryzol actually promotes that growth, but we have a plant parasitic nematode, hundreds of species. And the best way to be able to picture that is you've got the mouth right here of the nematode, and it has a stylet that goes right out of the mouth into the root, sucks the juice out of the root, and billions of dollars of damage are done by these plant parasitic microscopic worms. How's that?
That's a good segue. And one of the things we did not do at the beginning of the presentation was introduce ourselves. Maybe we can, if we have time, we'll do it at the end. But let me take a moment to just introduce Dr. Bruck to the call. He is Bob is a professor emeritus at North Carolina State University, and he's a world-renowned microbial engineer. And he specialized his entire life in soil-borne pathogens, plant diseases, and development of natural microbial solutions. He holds a PhD in plant pathology and phytopathology from the State University of New York. He also holds a PhD in forest ecology from Syracuse University, and was a postdoctoral fellow in plant pathology at Cornell. He holds over 40 academic honors in this world of plants and what we're talking about, and he's published over 300 peer-reviewed publications. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Bruck.
Wow. Thank you. And good evening, folks. It's a pleasure to meet you and talk to you. I've had two great graduate students there with Eddie and Blake. Have to give them honorary degrees, I think.
Yeah.
But the stage has been set. Basically, in 1995, I began doing what I'll just call clinical research with my collection of microbes that I've gathered from around the world through my travels. And what we were looking for originally were something that's very important, and that is microbes, natural biological organisms that will suppress plant pathogens and plant parasitic nematodes. You see up there that Phytophthora, Rhizoctonia, Verticillium, Sclerotinia, Sclerotium are just some of the over 25 different pathogens that I've worked with. And I should add, with trials on 42 different crops. The plant parasitic nematodes, the 900-pound gorilla is Melitogyne. That is the root knot nematode. It infects over 2,000 species of higher plants and causes tremendous amount of damage. Basically, as Blake already said, the only way to deal with most of these pathogens and parasitic nematodes are highly toxic pesticides and biocides. I don't want to go into detail, but you should understand that a great number of the pieces of ammunition that farmers have through these registered compounds are going to be gone. Methylbromide chloropicrin next year, gone. Telone, Nemacure, Furadan, Temic, they're powerful nematicides. They're going to be gone soon. They're biocides, and they, as already said, literally sterilize the soil, and we are going to pay for that in the future. Next slide.
He's not seen the whole slide.
Okay. So, as Blake said, I have done over 1,000 different trials all over the country on 42 different crops. I could spend the next 3 hours talking about.
Hey, Bob,
Yeah.
let me interrupt for 1 second.
Yes.
Is everyone seeing the entire slide or just a portion of the slide?
I believe I'm seeing the entire slide.
Okay, so it's not overly large on your display.
I see.
No, it's
Yeah.
side by side next to.
Okay, all
the
right.
caller.
Next
Fair
to the
enough.
pictures, right.
Fair enough. Thank you.
All right, no problem. So basically, I can present thousands of charts of data, but we don't have time. But just to give an example, we have the untreated, the blue, treated with our microbes, the orange, sugar beets, soybeans, golf greens, white potatoes, sweet potatoes, turf grass, meaning other types of turf grass like parks, big studies on hemp. And what we see are tremendous suppression. And we can go on with the plant parasitic nematodes on the right with the same numbers of the suppression. The key word here is reducing pathogens and nematodes to subclinical levels. Root systems can take a certain amount of damage, but once it passes a threshold, now you're dealing with a reduction of yield, of quality, and that is what we are constantly gunning after. Can we naturally reduce, using Mother Nature, in these soils, the plethora of pathogens and nematodes that are out there, and we have been highly successful in doing that. Next slide. Okay, well, what about the plant itself? A lot of people say, well, that's really nice that your roots are protected right now. On the other hand, what does it do? Blake mentioned something before that's very important. Virtually all 32 of the microbes that are in our formulation are saprophytes. What does that mean? It means it eats organic matter, the carbon in organic matter. That's the food that it uses. Where the plant needs NPK, as Blake said, all the microbes need is carbon, which is naturally in the soil and given off by the roots in the form of metabolites, exudates, glucose, sugar from the roots that feed these microbes. By the microbes breaking down the organic matter in the soil, hello, you're releasing the NPK in the soil, the natural soil, by breaking it down with these microbes. Hence, you get the equivalent of a fertilizer effect without using fertilizer. In addition, our microbes are secreting enzymes that break down the mineral soil and hormones that promote plant growth. Gibberellic acid, naphthalenic acid. These are natural metabolites. I didn't discover this, guys. It's been known for 30, 40 years. All we're doing is harnessing the natural biology of these organisms into producing healthier, bigger growing plants, more fruit, basically covering all the bases of what a good plant in a sustainable, even organic ecosystem needs to be able to thrive. Next slide. So again, all I want you to look at here is the green on the right. Okay, basically, this is a study on carrots, okay, a root crop that we looked at pathogens and nematodes, and Erwinia, Thelephora, Rhizoctonia, Verticillium, Pythium, Phytophthora are pathogens. Meloidogon, Paratrichodorus, Longidorus are plant parasitic nematodes. You can see on the right that in many cases, we literally eliminated the pathogens and reduced the nematodes significantly, while the free living nematodes, that number at the bottom, those are the good guys that are producing fertilizer in the soil, increased by 566%. Additionally, okay, so like you can understand what we have. On the left, you see total positive organisms. Those are the probiotic organisms in the soil. When we add Rhizol to that mixture, the treated on the right, 1.4 million versus 411,000. So in other words, our microbes are colonizing the soil, attacking the pathogens, attacking the plant parasitic nematodes, promoting free living nematodes. It's a all-purpose product. I call it the shotgun approach. We're actually shooting at all of the different factors leading to sustainable and healthy soils. Next slide, please.
Dr. Bruck, can I just interrupt for one question?
Please.
I saw that, in the presentation, and I know we've discussed it before, that Rhizol also allows to retain more water.
Yes.
Correct? Therefore,
Yes.
allowing the farmer or whoever it is, the farmer, the superintendent, et cetera, to use less water, which is a very valuable commodity today, very limited, regulated to a certain extent in certain states. And some crops, obviously, like almonds and others, use incredible amounts of water. So could you just quickly maybe get into that?
Very quick study, okay? Very quick study. We use Phoenix, Arizona. They got a water problem there. 2 adjacent soccer fields, one treated with Rhizol, one untreated. The one treated with Rhizol, the superintendent irrigated that field minus 40%. In other words, only put 60% of the water on that field. Guess what? The biomass of the grass, the color of the grass, the health of the turf increased even with the reduced amount of water. So why? What is the reason for it? By the microbes processing the organic matter and penetrating the soil, it's making, the best way I can put it is more fluffy. The term soil-wise is friable. Therefore, water is able to penetrate deeper and is being held by the organic matter in the soil versus evaporating from the surface. A big problem with turf and golf courses, thatch, that literally prevents water from penetrating. One last thing before I turn it over, because we're getting off the science right now. Let's talk about almonds. I know there are people here that are very interested in almonds. You got 2 major pathogens out there in this prunus species. The pathogens are verticillium and phytophthora. You have 4 major nematode problems. You have dagger, you have lesion, you have root knot, and you have ring. Maloided giant root knot being the 900-pound gorilla. Just so happens we have more data on those specific pathogens and nematodes showing suppression to subclinical levels than any other group of organisms. So you want to target a crop that I believe we could have a major impact on in improving the growth, viability, and quality of yield. Almonds would be a wonderful trial to put out and test it on. I'm done.
There was one question that was asked by one of the participants today, and they said, do you own the lyophilizer technology?
I'm sorry, do we own the light? No, in fact, part of the capitalization that we're seeking is to acquire lyophilization technology. However, Eddie, one of the projects we have underway now is whether or not that makes long-term sense for the company, because you can also essentially outsource that capability. Okay. Shall I continue, Eddie?
Please.
Okay.
Yes, please.
All right. So Eddie asked that I spend just a few minutes talking about our go-to-market strategy. And I'll start with this slide, which has lots of information on it. But really what I want to draw your attention to are the forecasted growth rates over the next 5 years in the various segments of crop protection categories. And so, as you can see here, the growth is quite stellar in almost every case, double digit. I'm still getting some feedback here. Check your mutes, please. And we believe that we can compete in all of these segments, and there are a lot of reasons for that. So let me just take 2 or 3, starting with the first one. In the soil amendments arena, there's a growing awareness about soil management and desertification of land. So desertification has been described as the greatest environmental challenge of our time. As Eddie was speaking to earlier, the loss of fertile land. And so the loss of biodiversity results in large losses of fertile soil, and that's certainly true globally. In some places, they can't even grow crops. And so we believe the company could play very, very well in just that singular vertical in terms of soil augmentation, to the point that Eddie made. The opportunity set is vast. The second one, in the microbials arena, North America alone is projected to have the largest share of this market in $4 billion by 2025. And that is being driven by the increasing growth of high value crops in North America and rising awareness among farmers about the environmental benefits of microbial solutions. And then the other thing I'd say about North America is the populations of North America in this region are also becoming more and more concerned regarding food safety and food quality. And I'm sure that resonates with almost every caller here. Another example is biofungicides, and that's the control of pathogenic fungi and bacteria, as the doctor was just talking about. The growth trajectory here is driven by factors like increases in demand for organic products, ever increasing stringent government regulations against the use of chemical-based crop protection products. And then, of course, last but not least, the growing health concerns that are associated with those same chemical-based products. And then the last example I'll give you is biopesticides. That's the fourth line there. And this market, and in particularly in fruits and vegetables, there's a significant inefficiency of conventional crop products and a heavy infestation and resurgence of insect pests and diseases and all sorts of crops ultimately reduces the quality and the overall appearance and taste of the produce. The last thing I'll say on this slide, if you look at the footnote that I made, is even though the growth rate in nematicides, which is what we just spoke about, isn't as large as others, the potential alone is just enormous for microbials. The nematicides market is expected to be $1.5 billion in size by 2025. And you saw we could have spent another 2 hours just showing you slide after slide about nematodal effects as a result of rhizol that all have the sorts of percentages that the doctor just explained. If you go to the next slide, Barry. Now, this is a framework that seeks to speak to our go-to-market strategy. And I always think about a go-to-market strategy as having several key pillars. The first is a sound business case. And where we are as a company is, how would I say it? We really have almost an embarrassment of riches situation. Our product is obviously broad spectrum, as has been explained. It's been heavily tested and trialed. Given the high efficacy of the product and our ability to target it to several markets and several channels, we're really in a great position to be able to shape a compelling business case for numerous different crops and value props. And as we all know, we're at a very pivotal point where environmental responsibility and sustainability are in the forefront of both citizens and investors, and it plays very well to the business case that we are presenting. The second pillar in the market strategy is really in its simplest form, the strategy itself. What markets are we after? And you can see here it's agriculture, retail, which includes home and garden and turf, and then specialty products. The third pillar is our pricing strategy for the product. We've done an enormous amount of work here. We already know that both the agricultural and the retail markets will bear multiple price points for both high value and low value crops. And we have researched this, taking into account current market dynamics, as well as sought the input of advisors to the company that appreciate various crop structures and break-even points in terms of production, and that are also very directly related to the various commodity markets. Just to illuminate this and to support the assumptions that we're making, Barry, if you'd go forward just one slide. You can see here that wheat, for example, is the most planted cash crop in the world. A crop like sugarcane has the highest yield, and it's one of the most popular crops planted in the world. But neither of these crops, for example, are nearly as lucrative as cannabis, which has by far the highest gross production value, as you can see here in this third-party research. So this is the type of research that informs and is informing our pricing analysis when we speak to the difference in price points, both high and low, for various crops. And you'll see in a minute why that's really important. Go back, please, Barry, to the previous slide. The next pillar in the go-to-market strategy is the branding and the marketing pillar. It's one thing to have a blow-away impressive product, which we believe we do. It's an entirely different thing to position it appropriately. And so these are some of the things that we're focused on. In the upper right-hand corner of this slide, I created a little cheat sheet, and it sums up how we really are thinking about it at 100,000 feet. Everything begins with the target customer, their challenges, their perceptions related to organic farming and growth. While Progro isn't inventing the space, we are in fact focused on being a disruptor in the space. And so part of the opportunity is almost setting customer expectations higher than many of the Me Too solutions that are on the market. And then the last pillar here is really the sales strategy. And that, of course, will span all the target markets I just spoke about. We're in the process of working with specialty recruiters in the sector to recruit specialized skills in sector reps that understand the markets and the distribution value chains, relationships, personnel, and so on. Next slide, Barry, or 2 slides forward. So these next 2 slides speak to our thinking about both agricultural and retail sectors and where the sales strategy will focus. Let me make a really important point about the ag sector, and I'm surprised Dr. Bruck didn't make it himself. Rhizol really is the first broad spectrum product that is focused on the agricultural segment. That's very, very key. We have a highly efficient, highly concentrated product. I explained that, how little you need to actually be effective in a large grow, and that can be applied on scale with thousands of acres. So it opens the market to us that is much, much broader than products that are simply sold on Amazon. And to address this market, you're not really talking about purchasing a product from Amazon and trying to force fit it into the agricultural arena. So that alone is a very expansive opportunity in agriculture. The ag research here that's also conducted by a third party and that we've studied ranks the top 100 largest agricultural retailers in the US. This only shows the top 10. But what's interesting here is you can see the percentages of total revenues in these very big players that are both national and regional relative to crop protection and fertilizer contribution to their bottom line. And so our key messaging here is going to focus on the things that you see on both sides of the bottom of the chart: reduction of pathogens and nematodes, as we've just talked about, the idea of soil amendment, biodiversity enhancer, and so on. I won't spend any more time on it, but you get the sense that we're very serious about how we're going to position. If you go to the next slide, Barry, many of these brands will look familiar to you. While we're initially focused on the agricultural segment, because we have such good traction with very strategic growers, we are pursuing the retail distribution market, and the types of brands that you see here are the types of targets where we would expect to position our consumer retail levels, retail labels. Now, the messaging here is essentially the same, but it has a little different twist. As you can see here, it's really about speaking to consumers about holistic and organic gardening, the ease of using the product, enhanced soil productivity, solving the same problems they have, but on a micro level compared to a farm, and so on. two big points on both sides of the chart at the bottom, just to reemphasize, there's no other known retail product on the market that can claim this broad spectrum efficacy with the increased yields and pest management documents that we have been able to produce. And on the right-hand side, you see the fact that what Rhizol really is truly a blend of every microbial class. And it covers a very wide range of plant issues. And so half of what Rhizol is comprised of are novel isolates. In other words, they do not exist in any other product in the market today. If you go to the last slide, and then we'll take questions. I think here, the final thing I guess I would want to bring to life is the branding and marketing potential that we have with our discoveries. What's very unique about Rhizol is not 25 different products, but Rhizol can be marketed and emphasized across multiple labeling opportunities. So you see here again, the major market segments that we'll be focusing on: agricultural, likely to be branded under the brand Rhizol. On the retail side, while we're still debating this, we may likely brand the product as a Progro product. And then of course, specialty products. And then one thing we haven't talked about is our library is full of microbes that really haven't been explored beyond discovery. And we believe that there are future formulations and extensions that are quite possible that would yield other opportunities out of the library. And of course, underneath that, the product would be labeled for specific opportunities or particular problem sets against the price point differentiation that I spoke about earlier. And last but not least, that would be, in sync with an optimal bottling and labeling strategy. I would say, just tell the people on the call that we're working with a very prestigious marketing firm now. We haven't finalized our relationship with them, but we are excited about the potential. They've done some enormously successful branding and marketing campaigns for other consumer-based products. And we've had several sessions with them and very excited about where we think this will go. So we've covered a lot of ground here. Much of it is technical. We've tried as hard as we can to kind of keep it at a level where it can be processed in 40 minutes or so. And we hopefully have done that. And, Eddie, I'll turn it back over to you for questions. Okay.
Yep. Thanks, Blake. So I'm going to, there was somebody had asked a question about another company, which Barry had given them an answer, but just again, if you remember, there was a question that was submitted on one of the last calls. If you could quickly just maybe go over what the difference is between Progro and Hologenics, Pivot Bio, NC Green Earth, Join Bio, some of which we all know are GMOs or are not basically 100% natural, non-toxic, etc. And I also want to make a comment myself, which is based on certainly my own experience, as a fund manager, and also as the fund manager to a company that some may be familiar called Bowery Farming. Bowery Farming is one of the certainly. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's one of the leading vertical farming companies on the planet, certainly. That has 4 farms, 2 that are basically operational at this particular time. They did a round last year, about 8 months ago. It was a $300 million equity round that was led by Google Ventures, GGV, Fidelity, Temasek, and Walmart. The valuation post-raise was $2.3 billion. And although they are in revenue, it is certainly early stage. A lot of the proceeds of the raise is being used to open new farms. The need for vertical farming is evident, I think, to almost anybody who invests certainly in the agricultural space as a result of some of the things we talked about, which is toxicity of soil, limited production of soil, and the desire of many people today to buy products that are the result of 100% natural, or what they might refer to as organic farming. So for some here, the company is pre-revenue. That's going to change quickly. And the valuation, which we can talk about off chart, but it's a fraction of what the Bowery raised. And in fact, I'm told that Bowery will probably go back to the markets next year at possibly 3 times that last raise, that 2.3 billion. So the ability for a company like Progro to go from the valuation that we're at, which is, let's call it a low $60 million in this particular offering, to significantly higher, can happen very, very quickly. And it could happen as quickly as, several large farms starting to order it, or the B2C starting to happen, whether it's through the home and garden areas of Home Depot or Lowe's or otherwise. And I also want to ask this question, and because we've talked about it, which is that the management of the company would like to be public, or potentially even have an exit through acquisition or merger. I think the go public would be even sooner, but by the end of 23. So, I mean, if I'm not correct in that, obviously things can change depending on how fast you grow. But people generally do like to know what the potential for either monetization or liquidity event are. So I wanted to at least speak to that.
Okay. Hey, Doc, we still have some reverb. I think Eddie maybe go on mute. Okay, I think that worked.
It's probably the barrier, you maybe being close.
Bob, why don't you take a shot at the doctor and the team have done a tremendous amount of competitor research. There's several things that I may add depending on the answers that you give, but maybe some perspective on how we quote unquote compare to some of the things many of the things that we've looked at.
Yeah, this can be answered very simply, actually. You take a look at the spectrum of quote microbial products that are out there. The vast majority of them consist of 1, 2, 3 organisms, typically mycorrhiza. They make all kinds of claims, and most importantly, literally, and Blake said this, there are no competitors that are shooting for mainstream agriculture. If you expand the price points on a bag of bush doctor microbes or whatever you're going to find and put it on a per acre basis, it's going to cost $4,000 an acre to use this material. And it doesn't hold a candle to what we have in Rhizol. We have, Blake explained this, what makes us unique? We have fungi, we have bacteria, we have actinomycetes, we have rhizobacters, we have ectomycorrhizae, and we have endomycorrhizae. Okay, I forgot to mention when I talked about almonds, that glomus, which is on almonds, which is a huge crop enhancer for almond orchards, we have 5 species of glomus in Rhizol right now. So when you compare it to other products, they're really, I mean, it sounds like I'm a marketing person. I'm not. There is no other competitor when it comes to the spectrum of what we have and ultimately the price points, depending on the crop type that we're selling it for, that we will be competitive in. The rest of them are, the word that I use is me too. It's just more of the same. There must be 50 products all competing against each other. That's just the same grouping of mostly mycorrhiza with potentially a few bacteria and a few fungi in there. None of them are broad spectrum in their formulation, or quite frankly, their testing. They'll say university tested. You call them up and say, oh, My name's Ignaz von Schmuck from Germany. I'd like to know what universities you tested it on. Okay, and they go, oh, well, that's proprietary. Okay, that's a very quick way of saying, no, we really didn't test it on anything, but we threw some stuff in a bag and we're selling it just like everybody else is. That's my answer.
Hey, Doc, let me take a shot at a couple of questions from the chat.
Yes.
One of the questions from the chat is, it has been said that one of the benefits of warming temperatures is higher crop yield,
Yeah.
but lower nutrient content.
Yeah.
Does Rhizol help to increase nutrient content in the soils in this situation?
Basically, nutrient content of a plant is dependent on two things: what it takes up through the roots, the NPK micronutrients that it gets through the roots, the hormonal effect of our rhizobacters on the roots, and availability to sunlight and carbon dioxide. And by the way, that is an oversimplification. You want to talk about a crop that's going to have a wonderfully high yield, believe it or not, the answer is poison ivy. You're going to see poison ivy like you have never seen before in your life. The inverse of that is we have actually done studies. We have a joint project through Duke and NC State looking at increasing CO2 enhancement in crops. And there's a huge swath where it initially might go up, then around the time that it's setting fruit, the actual photosynthesis goes down and there's no net effect. So that's
Hey, Doc,
yeah.
let me ask another question from the chat. How does Rhizol help the soil retain water?
Okay, I addressed that. Basically, Rhizol, through its enzymatic effect and the saprophytic effect of chewing up the soil, make the soil more friable. Fluffy is the best way to put it. It's like you took a wad of cotton and you pressed it down into a centimeter and then watered it. The water's going to run off of it. You puff it up into a aerated, friable soil. It retains more water and allows better drainage so that when the roots grow down, you actually have a water source further down in the actual soil horizons.
So Dr. Bruck, would you say that it turns something that isn't quite into like a sponge, so to speak, in most simplistic
yes,
form?
Good way, right.
Or like for somebody who comes from a high clay-based soil,
Yes.
which obviously doesn't allow water, and that's where you have really
Correct.
bad growth in golf courses too.
Correct.
Great soil with a lot. That's why they top dress and drill holes and get as much sand into the soil, because it allows the soil to hold the water.
It's called a PAN, a PAN, which prevents water percolation. Our microbes loosen it up. I love the analogy of the sponge. Great way to put it.
Let's see, Doc, got a question here that says, does Rhizol create fertilizer solely by destroying the bad nematodes? And I'll start that one out by saying, Rhizol, we're not a fertilizer.
No.
We can reduce the need for fertilizer by conditioning the soil. And Doc, I'll let you jump off from there.
It's actually not a bad question, okay? When you put Rhizol in the soil, it is going to destroy the plant parasitic nematodes. Nematodes are made, they have bodies like you and me. When a body decomposes, it's going to put their nutrients back into the soil. But the major way that Rhizol promotes, quote, a fertilizer effect is by breaking down the organic matter in the soil and solubilizing it, allowing for root uptake and mineralizing, demineralizing the soil through its enzymatic effect, releasing from the minerals the nutrients like potassium, phosphorus, micronutrients, calcium, magnesium into the soil. And basically, the more nutrition that's available in the soil, the better the plant uptake, the more, quote, fertilizer effect you get. But I reiterate, we are not a fertilizer. we have the result of actually secondarily doing a bit of fertilization, profiting the benefit of the plant in the soil.
Barry, can I ask Dr. Bruck a question too? Because most people, I think, can you just talk? And there are levels or ratings on produce, are there not, that are grown because of, some of the I'm not sure what the right terminology would be, but like certain produce that are grown can be sold for human consumption. Certain either are not of quality and therefore can't be sold. So there's a huge amount of loss there. Either they're sold to animals or stock, livestock, etc. And then also, I don't think most people, and I certainly probably didn't either, know that the vegetables we eat, we're not aware of some of the toxic
No.
right, that carcinogens that are in the fruit that vegetables that we are eating.
Yeah.
Could there, and this may be some, down the road, could this actually cause some of the bigger growers to say, hey, we're using something that actually helps our product have less carcinogens and makes it even healthier for human consumption?
All right, that's hard to answer.
As a marketing.
Yeah, that's hard to answer, but the first question that you answered, very important. The first major differentiation you have is organic certified versus commercial. Organic certified, as you know, means no pesticides, no chemical fertilizers. And you go to Whole Foods, there's a sticker right on it that says USDA organic certified. Premium price. Okay, a regular head of broccoli will be $1.95. The organic certified will be $5.95. That's the first differentiation. The second is very important. It's a good question, Eddie, because when you're growing, the perfect example are things like potatoes, either white potatoes, sweet potatoes, carrots are a good example. When you have a lot of nematodes and pathogens in the soil, they get damaged in the soil. You've always picked up a potato and there's a big brown spot on it. That's caused by a bacterium called Erwinia. The fact that Rhizol suppresses those pathogens right in the soil before it's even harvested means you have fewer seconds. That's what it's called. And what do the seconds go to? They grind it up. They make food for animals out of it. On the other hand, a bag of number one beautiful potatoes, you're going to get the greatest price for. So the answer is that there is a benefit in what's known as the post-harvest retention and value of the crop by having it be less damaged by nematodes and pathogens, which will be promoted by Rhizol.
Thank you, Dr. Bruck. Blake, I do think actually, just for introduction, one of my close associates and a manager, Loren Pisciotti, I believe, is on the phone, and I'm sure that she's got some people that she's invited. I can't see Loren, but I'm sure she's there. And she and I work together on several different offerings. So I just want to say that if anybody who's on the phone has any additional questions, please refer to whomever it was that invited you on the phone. I think maybe Dino may have some as well. Obviously, Dino's people and friends will call Dino. Unless there are some other questions.
Hey, Eddie.
I know that we've kept you guys an hour, so I'll go ahead if you want to sum it up. By the way, if you would just quickly give a little bit of background of yourself, Blake, and some of the, obviously, not just experience, but successes you've had.
Yeah, sure. Let me address the question that you did pose. I don't think we spoke to it about potential exit, monetization, liquidity events. I think the spectrum is pretty broad. We're not intimidated at all by the idea of an IPO. I've actually helped take a company public. It was one of the most successful IPOs in 2007 on the NASDAQ. That certainly could be a possibility with a company like ours. On the other end of the spectrum,
Blake, one second.
Complete monetization or partial monetization of various aspects of the company, and the derivatives of that, I think, are quite broad. So I think the team is open to any number of potential strategies there. With respect to just an introduction of myself, sorry to be doing it at the end. I've spent a substantial amount of my career in the energy sector. Over the last 10 years or so, I was focused specifically on renewable energy solutions. I've worked, however, outside of that sector. In particular, I worked in consumer products for a few years as an executive with Campbell Soup Company, where I worked across numerous brands of the company. Over the last 6 years in particular, I've had significant leadership responsibility in large-scale distribution and logistics businesses. I think I'm probably best described as a multidisciplinary executive and a governance leader, strong track record of revenue and earnings growth success. And I've been quite fortunate to
Dr.
lead some
Blake, I'm sorry
very
to
highly
interrupt.
successful companies and organizations. I also have a history of international business and strategy development. I've worked with venture capital, private equity, public and family-owned enterprises. So I have quite a diverse background in terms of ownership structures. And today I also serve as chairman of the board of a large multi-billion-dollar engineering and construction company. And I've served in that capacity over the last 5 years or so. I became associated with Progro over the last year, and I really came in to help the company shape their strategic plan and vision and put in place the operating and the financial plan of the company moving forward. So that's a bit of my background. Barry, would you like to just say a couple of words? I think it'd be good for the team to hear from you as well.
Be happy to. Let me get myself back up on here. I've lost my audio. Can you hear me, Blake?
No.
Okay.
I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
I lost my audio.
I think Barry has lost his audio, so we'll
I think I did also.
next time. I think Eddie, yeah, we're happy to answer any of the questions, but I want to tell everyone who took the time, especially in the evening, how much we appreciate the time with you. Hopefully we've been able to pique your interest. We think it's a great opportunity, and we'd love to have you be part of the growth potential of our company.
Great. Thank you so much. Blake, Barry, and Dr. Bruck, we really appreciate the time. I hope that that was as informative to everybody else as it certainly was to me. And we look forward to the continued offering and the success of the company. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Thank you.